Hi, my name is Gabrielle, and we're going to be learning how to make a render from Maya. And we're going to be making a still image or a image sequence afterwards so that we can put it into another program and get us a video so that you can show off your 3D work to anybody else. Step 1 is that we have to get to the render settings window. We get to it through the top menu up here, which lets us select Windows, Rendering Editors, and Render Settings. So now we just have our nice little Render Settings window over here, and we can already see a little bit of information. We'll be using the Arnold renderer. It's common with Maya, and if you get a student version of Maya, it might not be turned on. So real quick, to turn it on, if you don't already have it on, you go up to Windows, you go to Settings and Preferences, and your plugin manager, and you just need to scroll all the way down from up here to almost near the bottom, and you'll get Solid Angle MTOA Deploy, and that is the Maya to Arnold plugin. So you just click to make sure that it's loaded. See, if I try to turn it off again, if I try to turn it off, it warns me that I'm going to be missing a lot of my plugins, so I'm not going to do that. But make sure it's loaded, auto-loaded, refresh, everything's set up, and I have Arnold working. So here in our render settings, we can go up here to get our render view, right here. And as you can see, this image does not look like what we have on the screen. Let me minimize that. Zooming out, you can see that your render camera, which is perspective right now, is going to render whatever it sees in front of it. And Arnold itself is unique because as a renderer, it's supposed to take in the information that the program's giving it and work around that. So we already have some lighting right here. This is a directional light. And we have a character here, a 3D model, but it has some materials on it. So these materials are going to make it react differently than what we're looking at with the standard shader. So the standard Maya hardware here is going to render it differently, see, extremely overexposed, than if we use the Arnold renderer. And it takes a little bit more time to render it in because it's factoring in, the computer is factoring in the light bouncing off of the character and giving it a nice shadow, trying to make it look more realistic, but it takes a lot more processing power. So that's the main issue with using a heavier renderer like Arnold versus the default Maya hardware or the Maya software. But here we go. So over here in the render settings to the left, you're going to see 1280 by 720 is our image size. That's the standard definition size. When you initially opening up, it might just give you, scrolling down here, the image size. The preset might be set to 540, which is smaller, not as fun. But standard YouTube definition would be about 1280 by 720. And we can even make it larger and get it all the way up to 1920 by 1080. With 1080 being the 1080p high definition, clear quality video that you'd get on the top level of a YouTube video. We don't really need to go that crazy, so we can just leave it at 1280 by 720. So first things first, let's render out a picture. Image format here, we're going to select JPEG. You can also select PNG. Doesn't really matter right now for what we're doing. Or TIFF. TIFFs are heavier files, but we don't really need that. We're making a simple animation, and so we're going to go with JPEG. And for frame animation extension, this is probably what's going to make the biggest difference. If you set it to single frame, you're just going to render out one picture, just the frame that we have in our screen here. If you set it to one of these on the bottom, which includes a number or pound sign, a little hashtag right there, that is going to let you add frame padding. And the frame padding, right now it sets at 3. It normally comes standard at 4. You can see up here. the frame padding makes the difference between whether or not you're exporting an image or an image sequence. You set it down to 3 because we don't really anticipate making over 900 of these. And then you export them and you can just have yourself a nice image sequence that you can then bring into another program and turn into a video. So first we're going to export our frame. So we're going to go over here, single frame for now. Renderable camera perspective, over here it should tell you perspective. And the width and height, it's just standard. You can set it to anything you want though if you want to fit into a specific thing, but instead of cropping it, we're going to leave it. Alright, and then we're going to go over to render sequence, little box, and here you go, alternate output file location. You use this to select where you'd like to put your picture. I currently have a folder already open for this, but we'll just stick it in the stills folder. Select that, and render sequence. Alright, so it's already rendered, and we go here, rendering class, to our stills, and there's our rendered animation. Now, to make an image sequence, it's pretty much the same, except now we're finally going to use that oh so interesting frame animation extension drop-down menu and go here to name underscore number and extension. I just prefer it to the other ones. It's a little bit more clear to read for me. And we'll just select, you know, an interesting part of the animation. So when he about comes out of the wall, so about 37, or just before he gets out of there, all the way out to about 88 or 87 right there. Yeah, so about 36 to 87, that should be fine. And you input it here into your frame range, 36, 87. It doesn't do it automatically, you have to put it in yourself. And yeah, everything else should key out the same, and then you go up to your render view. And then you would do render sequence. You'd put your output location. For the purpose of this, we have a little folder I named surprise, and then you would select it, and then you'd render sequence. Thanks to the magic of editing, our surprise is already here. Yay! So it rendered from frame 37, you can see your frames up here, and as you click through it, you can actually see the flipbook effect of your image moving. Your sequence has been rendered out. Now you can put your image sequence into a program like After Effects or Premiere, and that's what we're going to do next to make a video. Alright, so let's delete that. We've opened up Premiere, and nice clean Premiere file. You right click here, import, and we go right back to where we have our image sequence. And instead of selecting all of them, you select the first one, and then you click image sequence. That means it'll take everything else that's after it numerically, import it in there, and bam. The only problem being is that if you can see it, there is an issue with our frame rate. Our frame rate says 29.97 frames per second. That's not accurate. Let's go back into Maya for a second, because it says that our Maya file has 24 frames per second, so you shouldn't really be importing footage that doesn't have the same frame rate as your original. So we just, to fix that, we right click it, go to modify, interpret footage, and then we set it to 24 frames per second, press enter, and we're good. Now we drag it in to our timeline, and there we go. Now we just gotta export it as an actual movie. So, click on it, File, Export, Media, and this timeline, you can scrub it through. Yep, that's definitely our terrifying bird and click here. And then you just select the folder that you'd like to render it in. Open, save it here. You can normally change the name if you like, but here's where it gets fun again. Format, H.264. What the heck is that? That's the standard video encoding format for an MP4, or at least modern MP4s, because that's what YouTube video encoders are. You can also get MPEG-4. You can see how grainy that got, because that's a reduced size by a lot, honestly. Then there's also AVI, which is uncompressed, but it can only get as big as its basic video settings, which is like 72 by 480. Not the most fun right here. That's an old widescreen. So we just go to H.264, and it's going to keep our width and height nice and crispy clean, nice and proper. And yeah, you just export it. Once again, with the beauty of editing, we already have our render. Surprise! And there it is. There's our terrifying bird in all of its glory. And that's how you would render a video.